Welcome to Rabai's Story, where every tale is a gift, told under the rhythm of rain and the roar of thunder. Settle in, let the storm surround you, and let the story unfold. Enjoy the ride. I moved to Monroe, Illinois, nearly 4 months ago. I'd never been one to settle in small towns, but this was where the job took me. Monroe wasn't anything special, one of those forgotten towns that time had passed by. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, and the only real excitement happens when someone's dog goes missing. But there was something about the place that felt wrong, even if I couldn't put my finger on it. Something about the people, the way they looked at you when you walked past, as if they knew more about you than you knew yourself. I lived in a small apartment above an old bar on the edge of town. Every night, I'd walk back from the bar after a long shift, my boots hitting the cracked pavement in rhythm with the wind whispering through the trees. There was always something unsettling about the silence. No cars, no voices. Just the occasional bark from a distant dog, or the rustling of leaves in the wind. The kind of silence that felt heavy, like the earth was holding its breath. That night, I felt it again, the unease that had been following me since the moment I arrived. It was a little past midnight when I left the bar, the door swinging shut behind me with a groan. I pulled my jacket tighter against the chill, glancing down the empty street. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. I started walking, my feet crunching against the dead leaves scattered across the pavement. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own footsteps, which made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It was too quiet, even for Monroe. As I passed the old cemetery on the outskirts of town, I noticed something strange. The gate, usually locked tight, was slightly open. It had been that way for weeks, but tonight it felt different. It was as if someone had just left it like that, intentionally. Maybe I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't supposed to be that way. The cemetery had always given me a sense of dread. I'd never been a fan of graveyards, but this one in particular seemed off. The tombstones weren't well maintained, half of them leaning at odd angles, their inscriptions worn and hard to read. I'd seen people go in there, but no one ever really stayed long. It was always empty when I walked by, save for the occasional bird perched on a stone. But tonight it felt like I wasn't alone. As I neared the gate, I stopped. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. That's when I saw it, a figure, standing still near the center of the cemetery. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow, or maybe a broken tree branch, casting an illusion. But no, the figure was moving. Slowly, unevenly. I took a step closer, trying to make sense of it. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it wasn't just any person. Whoever or whatever was standing in that cemetery had a presence that chilled my very soul. The figure didn't seem to have any shape, only a shadow, as if it were made of darkness itself. No details, no clothing, no face. I froze. I wasn't sure what compelled me to move forward. Maybe it was the alcohol still buzzing in my system, or maybe I was just too curious for my own good, but I found myself walking closer to the gate. My feet were heavy, reluctant to move, but my legs pushed me forward anyway, almost as if they were being controlled by something outside myself. The figure was now standing still, not moving, just watching. I felt its presence like an oppressive weight pressing against my chest. My breath quickened. Something wasn't right. The voice in my head screamed at me to turn back, to run as fast as I could, and never look back. But I couldn't. I couldn't tear myself away from the strange sight before me. I couldn't stop looking. I opened my mouth to speak, anything to break the silence, but before I could say a word, I heard a soft scraping sound. It was faint, barely noticeable at first, but it grew louder, like nails dragging across the ground. My skin crawled as I turned, searching for the source. That's when I saw it. The gate. It was moving. The iron bars scraped against the stone as the gate swung open, slowly, methodically, as if someone was forcing it open from the other side. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, my eyes fixed on the gate as it continued to swing wider. And then, nothing. The scraping stopped. I felt like I was stuck in a nightmare, where I couldn't wake up. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body refused to obey. I looked back at the figure. It hadn't moved, but now it seemed closer, much closer. How could it have crossed the distance so quickly? I didn't know, I felt the darkness in my bones. My eyes darted around, desperate to find an escape. But there was nothing. The street was empty, silent, just like it always was. The figure had to be the source of the unease. The gate had been a warning, a sign that something had changed. And now I was standing in the middle of it. Before I could process what was happening, I heard it again. The voice, it wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Low, raspy. You shouldn't have come back. The words sent a jolt of fear through me, straight to my core. My blood ran cold. I wanted to speak, to ask what it meant, but I couldn't find my voice. The figure took another step forward, its presence growing stronger, more oppressive. It wasn't just standing there anymore, it was looming. The air grew colder. My breath came out in visible puffs, but they hung in the air longer than they should have. Like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. The figure's shape began to shift, rippling like the surface of a pool disturbed by a stone. And then it was no longer just a shadow. A face formed, pale and gaunt. The skin stretched tight over a skull that looked like it had been dead for years. The eyes, if you could call them that, were hollow, sunken into the skull, black voids that seemed to swallow the light. It moved closer. A hand, skeletal and thin, reached out from the darkness, its fingers long and crooked. "Why did you come back?" It rasped. The ground seemed to tremble beneath my feet, and I took a stumbling step backward, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I turned and ran, my feet barely touching the ground, the figure's voice trailing behind me. "You shouldn't have come back." I didn't stop running until I was back at my apartment, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys to the door. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. The figure was still there, watching, waiting. I left Monroe the next morning. I packed my things in a hurry, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I didn't care anymore. All I wanted was to get as far away from that town as possible. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I hear the voice again. Low, gravelly, "You shouldn't have come back." And sometimes, when I pass an old cemetery or see a figure standing in the distance, I freeze, my heart racing, and I wonder, was it really just a nightmare? Or did it never let me leave?